Well, hello, Alliance Northwest friends. Hey, Amy and I have been in the midst, or the beginning of our transition. We've been praying for all of you, all of the churches, all of our leaders, and just wanted to take a moment and stop and pause and talk to you about posture, pivots, plans, and prayer. Give you a little update on our journey at the end. But just in the midst of this COVID crisis, just a little check in for all of us. I know you've been inundated probably with tons of information and you don't know which ones to turn to, or maybe you're feeling a little oversaturated or over marinated. I just want to give you a few things today. Start with a couple quotes. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite. Lewis said that hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. Right now, ordinary people are being formed by God for some extraordinary ministry in the midst of COVID 19, through COVID 19, and on the other side of COVID 19, although that world will be different than the world was when we entered into it. Einstein also said this. He said, adversity introduces a man to himself. We are seeing, people unravel at an alarming rate. Fear is rampant. The media is not helping this at all. I'm sure you, like me, have encountered or have been ministering to a number of people that are literally just terrified and afraid. It wasn't that long ago. I remember this whole thing started, and it was, hey, we're going to limit gatherings to 250. People had to start scurrying to figure out what are we going to do in light of this. Then it went to 50 quickly, right? It felt like for a while, every other day, we were having to change our plans and reorganize the way we did everything. It went from 250 to 50 down to 10, right? And then it came to man, you better be wearing a mask. And if there was 5 of you gathered, people were starting to turn each other in. It's gotten ugly. Einstein's quote, it's true. Adversity introduces a man to himself. We see who we really are when pressure's on. So, pastors, friends, ministers, this is the time for our posture to be one that helps people's fear move towards trust in God. This is the time for us to lean into Holy Spirit's voice like never before. This is the time for us to be living examples of what faithfulness in Jesus looks like, and to not succumb to the fear-mongering that is prevalent around us all the time. Now, I'm in the same boat as you. Same fears hit me too when all this started. It's like, wow, if we're not having Sundays, what's going to happen to income? What's going to happen to our people? Are we going to lose the church? All of these things began hitting me as well. However, I want to read to you first from Psalm 3. I found some solace here first. And David writes this psalm, and he's on the run from his son Absalom. He finds himself in a brand new space, leaving one world, heading towards another. But his heart's broken, his future's uncertain, and he pens the words of Psalm 3. David writes, O Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. I tell you, there's a lot of people saying that about the church right now. Hey, this is the end of the church. God and his plan for the church is bigger than any pandemic, any virus. David continues, you are a shield around me, O Lord. You bestow glory on me. You lift up my head. Can you get that imagery? To the Lord I cry aloud, and he answers me from his holy hill. I lie down and I sleep, and I awake again because the Lord has sustained me. I will not fear the tens of thousands drawn up against me on every side. And here his human side comes out. So arise, O Lord, deliver me, O my God. Strike all my enemies on the jaw. Shatter the teeth of the wicked. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people. David, in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the crisis, in the midst of the unknown, his tether was into God. His trust was in God. So he moved from fear to a ruthless faith. That really needs to be our posture for people right now. They need to see that. And there's also this one promise, you know the story as well as I do, but in Matthew chapter 16, Jesus enters Caesarea Philippi, and he asks his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? So they start to respond to him. Well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others still say Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. Then Jesus pivots his question, right? But what about you? Who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. That's a really important reminder for us. The church has been, as we've seen in the West, in decline for a number of years. You felt it, I felt it. We are all working harder. We're trying to work smarter. This comes along, COVID-19 comes along, and more fear raises up. But what we tether into is the promise that Jesus will build his church. The gates of Hades, the gates of hell, will not overcome or overpower the church. Our job is to remain faithful, to stand strong, to tether into Jesus, to be those beacons of hope. That's the posture that the community around you needs to see. Your church needs to see that right now too. And those who don't believe yet in your communities, when they see you in the midst of the COVID crisis, tethering deeply into a firm trust in God, that will begin to help their fears move. I don't know about you, but when our posture is like that, what I have seen with the pivot, the second P I want to talk about today is the pivot is, man, we've had to do ministry differently. We have had to change things up. It felt like every other day for weeks after week after week. Some of you have never been online before, and you're online, and kudos to you. Some of you have gone online, and you've seen growth in your numbers because you've been online. Some of you have pivoted, and for the first time you're doing online giving. Great job. Some of you have pivoted and you've started Zoom small groups. Great job adapting to the new culture that you find yourself in. This period, why we need to pivot, this period we're in, I would call a cognitive dissonance. We know the way things should be, or at least the way we want them to be. And we've come out of a period of time where things were one way, but now they're another, and we don't like it. It's disruptive. It's disorienting, and so we end up in this really hard space of cognitive dissonance. We just don't know what to do with it. Another term you could say for where we're at is a liminal space. A liminal space is that we have exited the place where we were. We have not quite yet got to the place where we're going. So liminal space is that space in between what was and what is. And that is a hard space. I found this quote this week. I thought it was true. Victor Turner, an anthropologist, wrote that our liminal space is the in-between space. Here, the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual areas of our lives are destabilized, disoriented. The old touchstones, the old habits, and the old comforts are now past. The future is unknown. We only wish such a time to be over. We may be impatient to pass through it quickly with as little distress as possible, even though that is not likely. That is really where we are at right now. But here's what I'm finding. Those churches who are posturing with trust in Jesus and are pivoting and adapting to what is happening rather than burying their heads in the sand or just hoping for it all to pass, those who are pivoting are positioning themselves to really minister powerfully in the midst of COVID-19, but they will be the churches that are ministering powerfully post-COVID-19. And I'm praying that that's you. I'm praying that the fear has not got you down, but that you are anchoring into Jesus and you are finding hope in him. A friend of mine, Bernie Vandewald, he is the district superintendent of the Canadian Midwest District. He used to be a professor up at Ambrose. He said something the other day. I just got to find where I put it. Oh, there it is. That I thought was important for us pastors. He said, pastors, for the sake of your people, do what you can to flatten the curve. But for the sake of your ministry, do everything you can to be ahead of the curve. Those are some really, really wise words. When we're pivoting, we're trying to get ahead of the curve, right? And as I say, so many of you have been pivoting well. I'm watching on average 20 to 25 of our church services and midweek services every week just to see what's happening, what's going on. You're doing a good job. Those of you who have gone online, you've moved from, or you are moving from just having an online stream service to realizing, we need to do a better job of connecting, engaging in conversation in the chat, following up. At SVA, we've actually grown over these last weeks with COVID-19. We're seeing a very consistent growth in our online activity. I think we've had over 20 people make commitments to Jesus Christ online in the chat since Good Friday. And I'm seeing that with a number of churches. And that just, it fills my heart. So as we are pivoting and we're looking at, okay, how do we do this well? Not just how do we get something out there. You're looking at how do we adapt, which means we have to start planning, not only for what's church going to be like post-COVID-19, but it's going to be a different world regardless. Things aren't going to go back to the way they were. And I think this is a kick in the pants that God is giving the church to say, it's time to be missional to the core, not to talk about being missional, but this is time to be missional. I really think some of the greatest harvest is ahead of us in the next decade. Some of the most creative church planting ideas can be in the next 10 years. Some of the most creative ministry concepts right now are being born in your hearts and in your minds that we're going to see come to fruition in the next 10 years. Let's not miss this moment. So we need to plan well. I've put some links along with this video for you. This is one of the links. It's just a small PDF. It's from a pastor who is at Bowling Green Alliance Church. He had posted it about a 3-phase return to church that I thought was just really good. Obviously, it's not a one-size-fits-all, but I'd encourage you to download this and have these conversations with your leadership team, your board, your ministry leaders. He looks at 3 phases: a return phase where there still is this high request for strict, safe distancing going on. How are we going to operate as a church? Phase 2, he says, is the transition. And we're reducing to a moderate safe distancing. What is that going to look like? And are you ready for that in the church? Phase 3, he says, is the new normal. With the removal of safe distancing and how we go back to church with modifications. There are just some really important things that he notes in here as far as with each phase. Masks, are they required or optional? When do they become optional? What about nursery and kids? When to ban those and when to bring them back in? Let's say we go back to 250 people gatherings again. If you were one service before and you were 250 or under, how many services will you need now? If you were 500 or more, how many services will you need to do to keep safe distancing? And then as the numbers increase, how will you manage that? Do you have Purell stations? Do you have masks? How will you do communion? How will you be doing baptisms? These are the questions to get ahead of now. So anyway, download this PDF. It's just super good information. Really appreciate it. Go to also the district website, Alliance Northwest, alliancenw.org. /resources. There's some great COVID-19 resources on there. for ministry, for finances, yeah, you name it. I really encourage you to go check them all out. Brian Hafferty from Anchor Church in Tacoma. We have a video of Brian up there with just outreach ideas. Check that out. This is time to be sharing. There's also a larger guide from the national office, if you can see that one, for planning to relaunch your public gatherings. A lot of questions to go through. Again, download that. Great time to go through all of these types of questions with your teams. Go through the resources on the district website. Just a couple other last things I would love to just share with you. Just some other thoughts to have in mind is, as we do head back, what are the things that you've learned as you've done Zoom small groups, online church? What have you learned and that you're going to carry forward? What aren't you going to carry forward? What will your first gathering day look like? You might consider a whole sermon series on, the church gathered, but plan that day specifically. You will need to assuage fears. You will need to protect those who are the most vulnerable, right, still. So showing your community that you're taking their safety as a priority. And what have you done to sanitize, communicate those types of things for that first gathering? So plan it out. Think through every detail. Communicate how you're going to make people feel safe so that as they walk in, they know that. Think about how are you going to impact your community post-COVID-19. This too shall pass. God has us, right? And so I just want you to right now, while you're in this in-between space, to take advantage of the opportunity you have, the opportunity that we all have, to really make an impact for the kingdom of God. Sharing our ideas with each other, reading our stories. And again, make sure you hit the district website. Just click on stories. God's doing some great things all around the district. Posture is one of faithful trust in Jesus. He's got this. Pivoting to adapt to new ministry methods. This is going to catapult us into the next decade. Our plans. Plan now for what's coming. So as we come out of COVID-19 timeframes, you are ready and you're ready to hit the ground running. Those churches are going to prevail. And prayers. Here's some prayers I'm going to ask personally for Amy and I. So as we transition right now, I've said really my last major message to SVA Church. That was hard because I wasn't with them. My wife, who's a principal, the schools, as you know, are shut down, so she didn't get to say goodbye to her kids. This has been a hard liminal space for Amy and I with all this transition, but we're just trusting Jesus. So pray for us. Our house is kind of torn up. It goes on the market in a couple weeks as we begin our journey from Fall City down towards Portland, Vancouver. So I just ask you would pray for Amy and I. Pray for Snoqualmie Valley Alliance Church. Pray for the district office staff as I'm starting to engage with them now. I've got a lot of excitement. Also working through a lot of letting go right now. So covet your prayers. I'm going to leave you with a final quote from the great theologian LL Cool J, who said, "When adversity strikes, that's when you have to be most calm. Take a step back, stay strong, stay grounded, and press on." Friends, this is a time for us to stay calm, step back, stay grounded, and press on. Jesus has this, and I'm trusting Him for my future and Amy's future, our district's future, and I'm trusting Him to move powerfully in your church like never before. I love you all, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Have an awesome week.